So as we head into our scripture time today, which Danna's going to read our scripture for us, you have a special invitation and a special opportunity I'm inviting you into a way of hearing the scripture today that might be a little different. So imagine for yourself that you are a first century Palestinian, that you live near the Sea of Galilee, that you've heard of Jesus for the first time as this wandering preacher, rabbi that has done some miraculous things, that has been profound and that people are talking about, and you are curious as to who this rabbi is. And so you are one of the crowd who has gathered for what we call the Sermon on the Mount. So you've gathered on this hillside near the Sea of Galilee, and you have already begun to hear some of his teachings. So this chapter is the third chapter of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. And so we've already heard some of the Beatitudes and some of the other more familiar passages, perhaps, of the Sermon on the Mount. But to you, they're not necessarily familiar because you're hearing them for the first time. This Sermon on the Mount, as we call it, now that we've heard it many times, we've read the book of Matthew, you don't even know who this Matthew is, okay? You're hearing these for the first time. And so I invite you to shift your perspective a little bit, to hear these scriptures for the first time. And as I mentioned earlier, that we will preach the sermon together, because I'm going to invite you as new hearers of this word to talk to me about what you're hearing, to take on being a first century Palestinian and talk to me about what makes this man different and captures your attention. So let's now hear Matthew 7.
Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, "Let me take that speck out of your eye," while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you. Ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give a stone? Or if the child asks for a fish, will give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many deeds of power in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you evildoers. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand.
And the last verse there is, the rains fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. So here's the part that describes you, hearers, for the first time of this passage. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teachings, for he had taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. So what has astounded you today? What strikes you? What's your first impression? There's a lot there, okay? He said a lot of things. I'm going to hold the microphone, but I'm going to let you talk.
I think back about the children's story that we had of the dancing chicken. That really has stayed with me, Beth, because I think we get so tied into our own little worlds and just thinking about ourselves and not seeing the big picture. So after that children's story, I'm trying to more see the big picture, which I think is part of what the scripture was.
Okay, we're seeing a bigger picture. So I'll come to you in just 1 second. So we've been living under the 10 Commandments. We've been making sacrifices at the temple, perhaps once a year making a pilgrimage to the temple to make a sacrifice. This is our way of making things right with God. And we're seeing a bigger picture. Okay.
Okay, if I'm a first-time attender, I'm going to wonder just who this guy is. How can he command these humongous crowds like this? How does he keep them quiet? How do they listen to him? What are these words he's saying that they're so different from anything I've ever heard before? Maybe there is something to him?
So there's something about this man. Yeah, there's nothing in the text that tells us that people were talking or that there was discussion time. He's teaching. Yeah. So there's something about him. What do you think that is?
He speaks using metaphors a lot. I mean, it's kind of like the meaning isn't always immediately obvious, so you kind of have to let the image sort of kind of settle in your mind a little bit and kind of think about that a little bit without kind of analyzing it too much, but kind of just let it reveal its own kind of meaning. That's how I hear it.
Is there one of the illustrations, one of the metaphors that particularly caught your attention today?
there are several. Here. It's helpful to have the written. Yes, actually, that was one that, yeah, the spec and the log. That was the first thing that stuck out. The idea that that there's sometimes the way I interpreted it was kind of that we don't necessarily always see clearly. I mean, there's
I was thinking of Diane's talking about not always seeing clearly. That's why I was.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, and that it can. I mean, the traditional interpretation, I think that I've heard a lot of this, is that we kind of tend to, it's easy to judge other people easier to see their errors than it is to see our own. I also have a photography kind of, take on this in the sense that the judgment, actually that was what stuck out to me first, was that the idea that it's that the value judgments we place on our experience are almost unconscious, and they're kind of knee-jerk. So we may kind of say, oh, that's good or that's bad, depending on our perspective. So I'm taking this maybe longer than everyone wants to hear, but but just that we don't necessarily see what's actually in front of us, because our judgment is clouded by, our seeing is clouded by our judgment. That's another way to put it, maybe.
And even maybe that to judge that other people are not, think that you're taking too long might be a judgment, even. You know? Right? Because what you came to, yeah, there's a lot more to say, of course. That was powerful. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay? So our judgments, our own perceptions can get in the way.
I see where, as a Pharisee is hearing this for the first time, you're talking about everything do unto others as you would have them do unto us. That's powerful. Can that really be something that what I do is to others would come back to me?
And that we can make a difference in the world by treating others the way we would want to be treated. In fact, he says, for this is the law and the prophets. So all of what you as a Jew have been hearing hangs on this. All of the law and the prophets comes down to do unto others as you would have them do to you. How freeing is that? With all of the rules, the grain sacrifice, the wine sacrifice, the first fruits sacrifice, the etc. That it would come down to treating others as you would have them treat you. Sure.
I thought it was interesting too, and I don't know that I've thought of it this way before, but it's as you would have them treat you. It doesn't mean that that he has been treated in the same way that he's being asked to treat others. But it would be, if you could be treated by others the way you want, then treat others that same way.
So there's no guarantee that that's going to come back to you. You're treating regardless of whether they're going to treat you that way or not. That's powerful. That's a lot of trust.
The analogy of the speck in your eye, this past week I was working with Levi, and I got twice I got sawdust in my eye, and then we were spray texturing a ceiling, and I got that in my eye. And that whole noticing something in someone else before I notice what's in me, when you've got something in your eye, you can't notice anything else. I mean, literally, it's crippling. So that just kind of painted it in a new picture for me.
Okay. So if we have something that's blinding us, that's crippling us, we may not be able to see much else. Sometimes we then project that onto other people, that same affliction, don't we? Yeah. Yes.
At the end of the scripture there, he's saying, ask and you should receive. Because I don't think we do that. I don't know if we think that's selfish to ask. But last week somebody said to me, read the back of your bulletin. They have really good ideas back there. And the one today was somebody that was struggling with anxiety. And the last paragraph there, this is Michael Powell from Florida. He said, I don't know what problems you are facing in life right now, and I can't begin to imagine the hurts you've felt, but I can promise you this. Our mighty God is greater than those problems and hurts. The good work that was started in you, God will preserve it and see through to completion. So the next time you feel under attack and don't know which way is up, remember our gracious and merciful God is your shield. And I think every day there are times when we can ask God and let God help us through whatever issues we have for the day. I think he made that real obvious in that ask and you shall receive.
And we can talk to God. We don't have to go to the temple or the synagogue to get someone to intercede for us, do we? We can talk to God. We can ask. What about trampling? What was that text? It was, do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under foot and turn and maul you. What do you hear in that? Sure, I'll read it again. This is verse 6. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you.
He's going full route on them, right? First, they're not only judgmental with the board in their eye, but do I want you to help me if I got a speck in my eye? and I'm looking and there's a plank sticking out of yours, no, I don't trust you. So they're hypocritical, they're judgmental. He even said they know how to be good parents, but you're evil. Here, now he's just attacking the whole religion, everything they're going after. Your religious leaders, your whole faith is, and it's like I wonder on the way home how many of these little discussions are going on. Did he really just say, you know, we're giving our offerings, we're giving to swine, and everything that we're doing from a religious standpoint is going to hurt us in the end? I think they probably had more questions going home than they had answers.
How are we with questions? How are we with having more questions at the end of a day or a service, a week, a lifetime, than we have answers? How are we at living in the questions?
What I heard with the pearls and the whatever it is, other one was that we are to remember what's valuable and keep it or elevate it or honor it rather than throwing it away indiscriminately. And the thing that had caught me in this scripture, Chris, was because I didn't remember that it was in this section about the good and bad trees being known by their fruit. Glenn brought home some nectarines this week that were beautiful. They were large and absolutely tasteless. And he suggested that they were genetically engineered to grow quickly and beautiful. But the tree didn't do anything that was impressive other than that. So remembering that the tree is known by its fruit was a good thing for me.
So sometimes we can have a pretty result, but there's not any value to it. We can put on a facade, maybe. Okay. And I also heard you saying that it's important to remember what's important, and not lose sight of that. And I heard perhaps as the two of you have talked about that piece, that perhaps Jesus was having them explore what was important about their faith, or let's stay in character, having us think about what is important in our faith, and are all the things that we're doing as important as loving other people, treating them as we would want to be treated. We may be able to make the right sacrifices, or go to the temple the right number of times, or go to the synagogue every Sabbath, but are we communing well with others? Do we taste good? Do we taste good? Yeah. I see some more hands. I saw Cody's first.
You were paying attention. I was just going to say, connecting with the quote that you read. Yes. About the. Yeah. Yeah, that one. I was thinking that it's important to. I think that maybe part of determining whether the fruit of something is going to be it's going to bear good fruit, I guess, is valuing the teaching, and it's also important. I mean, going along with valuing it is really. I'm kind of going in a different direction, but that scripture that you read, I think is speaking to the fact that it's important to notice who you're speaking to and whether they're in a place to hear what's being said, and also at the same time, I think treating it with giving it the full attention that it needs, and not just. Does that make sense?
I think I'm hearing you say, paying attention to the context in which we're sharing, and so if someone is ready to hear, then we can speak and share our pearls of wisdom, what we have learned from our faith, what we've learned about God. If they're not ready, it's like throwing them on the ground and having them be stamped on, and so perhaps at that moment, the biggest testimony we can give is to treat them well, treat them as we would want to be treated. To pull in a different line of our scripture for today, if they're not ready to hear. Okay?
Jesus has referred several times to the dirtiness, as the people at that time see it, of the swine. In fact, in the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son, he gets so low that he eats with the swine, so to speak. That's how low he gets, according to how Jesus talks. And then he talks about the swine being so evil that you can cast out the evil of the human being, and it looks as though it's a pearl in the swine, but you give it to the swine and they go over the cliff and your pearls are gone. So it's kind of interesting how he's used these different things all together in the long run, but I'm sure the people, at least I would not understand what in the world he's talking about.
So that's where the context of his hearers, knowing that they could not eat pig, they could not eat swine, it was considered dirty, would allow for a different sort of contextual meaning that would color how we see what he's saying. It's a type of judgment, in fact. As we think about the first verse about not judging. So, yes, you took us into some other passages, which we're not necessarily excavating today, but yes, definitely swine in this passage are in the context are dirty animals, and so that colors how we hear that piece.
My being here the first time, I'm an ignorant farmer or someone that has never been to anything like this. Without discussing with other people, how am I to decipher what he's saying to me? Because I've never been here before. I know that there are some rules just by, being handed down from your parents or whatever. But how am I to decipher what that means to me? Because I'm not discussing it with other people. So I'm at a loss when he's saying these things. And I don't know how to determine what he's saying to me.
I'm hearing you say that you would like to discuss this with your community to figure out how it applies to you, figure out what in all of these metaphors about good fruit and pearls before swine and building your house upon a rock, what? Okay, if you're a pig farmer, is he calling you evil? Good question. Faye?
I don't know back then if I would have been an English teacher. However, having been one for 30 years, I need supporting sentences for a statement. So when he says, when he tells me, no, don't throw your pearls before swine, give me an example. If what is holy, don't give what's holy to dogs. What in the world is he talking about is holy? Communion bread? Is he talking about, what is he talking about being holy? I need supporting sentences. What did he mean there? So I'm not really playing the devil's advocate, but I'm just kind of wanting to know. If you're going to say it, support it.
All right. I think discussion is the name of our game today, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he talks about entering through the narrow gate, and he's not talking about exactly what that is either, is he? Uh-huh. Okay. Common, ordinary people are listening. They need supporting sentences too. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a great question. Why are they even around, right? Yeah. Well, maybe it's the occupying forces of Rome that raised the pigs. Maybe.
If I could just add something that maybe that I'm interpreting in here is that the seeing pigs or anything as good or bad is essentially a judgment. I think he's using it as an example to say that pigs have from a human standpoint, they have very loose, rough habits. They're not clean animals. They don't groom themselves. They don't pay attention to how they behave, which are things that in a sense everybody has we all have things that we pay more attention to and things that we don't. And so my interpretation of what he's saying is that if I know we're going on I really appreciate what you're doing, Chris, because this gives a chance for people to really go deeper into this stuff instead of just taking it in and not thinking about it and then going on. But what was I saying? So that my interpretation here is that the metaphor that he's giving is very subtle in a way, and so it's not going to be understood if we're if we're acting like pigs in a sense, like if we're not paying attention to our state of mind, our kindness to others. I don't think that pigs necessarily are good or bad. I think they're good, essentially. They're animals. Yes, as are people, all people. But, okay, so I'm taking this longer than we need to, perhaps.
I see Janice has her hand up. And yes, it's 12 o'clock.
I think we're picking on the pigs and we forget about the dogs. I think that he is simply saying, in my opinion, that if you give something to someone that's out of their realm, in other words, if you know, dogs eat certain things, pigs value certain things. If you give them inappropriate items, they don't know what to do with them. And they're not giving them what they need, so they're going to turn on you. I agree. I don't think that he's saying that pigs are evil. I think that what he's saying is that their natural instinct would be if they're hungry and you give them pearls, they're not going to appreciate it. And if you give dogs something that they would not normally eat, they're not going to be satisfied. And so we need to be, you know, when it says that we treat others as we would want to be treated, if I was in need of food and somebody gave me a blanket, I might appreciate the blanket, but I really needed the food.
I think I heard some wisdom in that. How about you guys? Yeah? I see a W there, a sign language W. Very good. Well, I would like to bring this to a bit of a close in saying thank you for sharing what astounded you, what brought new wisdom in the hearing of these words today. I want to thank you for sharing and for taking part in what I call the upside down kingdom. So it wasn't just a monologue from me. We shared together. And in the prayer time, I failed to uphold the teachers and the students and the parents and the Pears and all of the professionals that work with the students. And so I'm reminded of that in this moment in which we all were teachers and we all were students in a sense, in that we all had an opportunity, an invitation at least, to share, even if we didn't speak out loud. But so thank you, and I appreciate your sharing and engaging the text in a different way today. Amen.
Thanks for watching this video from the First Church of the Brethren in Wichita, Kansas. If you'd like to watch another video, click the link on the right. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video. And we'd love to have you join us on Sundays at 9:30 for Sunday school and 10:45 for worship. Everyone is welcome and you're invited.